In this session, we're going to start looking at the really fundamental concepts of this course: class, object, and instance. It's obviously important to understand what these pieces of terminology mean, and although we won't give complete coverage, it should be enough to get started with thinking about how they relate to Java and object-oriented programming, and we'll do a little bit of exploration of how they map into Java. So our starting point of defining class is that class describes a category or type of thing. Thing is a little bit abstract here, and actually the concept of class is a little bit abstract, but hopefully as we explore you'll develop a better understanding of that. Another way of putting it is that a class is a bit like a template or a blueprint. It provides us with the design of something that we want to realize in practice or in a concrete form. So a class defines a common set of general characteristics, and that word general is very important here. In contrast, an object is something that has a concrete form, it has specific individual characteristics, but an object belongs to a particular class. And what we say is that an object is an instance of its class. So in this course, we're going to be writing Java source code that define classes, and from those classes we're going to be creating instances. In other words, we're going to be creating objects of particular classes. So let's explore the idea of class a little bit further. If I were to say the word bicycle, now bicycle is a class, and you know what a bicycle is. You can probably form a mental image of a bicycle. It's got two wheels, it's got a chain, it's got pedals, it's got handlebars. But each of you might be thinking of a slightly different form of bicycle. And that doesn't matter, because the concept of bicycle encapsulates the general characteristics of bikes: two wheels, pedals, chain, handlebars, and so on. However, if we want to think about a specific bicycle, then we have to move from the general concept of a class to think about an instance of that class. For instance, here's an instance of a bicycle. This is my bicycle. It's got a particular color. The wheels have a particular radius. It's got a particular number of gears. So we say this is an instance of class bicycle. And you might have your own bicycles, each of which is a particular instance. So this particular bicycle is an object from the class bicycle. Let's think about another class, motorcycle. If I say motorcycle, it's a step up from bicycle, and now we know that this is a two-wheeled vehicle that has an engine. But again, you might be imagining a pizza delivery motorcycle, or one of those motorcycles with long handlebars that people ride across the great expanses of the US on Route 66 or something like that. It really doesn't matter. Motorcycle is a class. It's a concept that embodies some general characteristics of two-wheeled vehicles. But again, we can think about particular instances. This is my particular instance of the class motorcycle. It's one of potentially many. Look around the roads, there will be many instances of the motorcycle class. In fact, you might say, well, this is one particular instance of a very specific class of motorcycle. It's a Honda NC750X. And there are lots of other different types of motorcycles, more specific classes of the type motorcycle. And we'll come on to some of those nuances later on in the course. Let's think about another class, ship. If I say ship, you know what a ship is, but it's defining general characteristics of things that are quite large, that sail on oceans, cover long distances. So ship is a class that covers lots of potential different instances of that same class. Here's a picture of one particular instance of the ship class. And we know that ships will have engines, they'll have a particular course that they're on at any one time, particular speed, and so on. And now we can begin to think about how these class concepts relate to Java programs. For instance, we might decide we want to write a program that models the concept of a ship. So for instance, here is a BlueJ project, in which I have a class called ship. That rectangle that you see in the middle of the window represents some Java source code that I've written that's designed to model the general category or class or type of ship. And one of the things that BlueJ allows me to do is then to create individual instances of that class that realize those concepts in a concrete form. So just to give you a look at the kind of source code that I've written in order to try and model the concepts of a ship. Here we've got something called a class ship, and it's got various characteristics like a position, a speed, a course, a name, and a radar view of where it is. In a moment we'll see some examples of how that might look in a programming environment when we start to run the program and create instances of the ship class that then have their own individual characteristics and behave distinctly and individually. So just for fun, let's have a look at how using this ship class might work in practice. First stage is to create an individual instance, and because it's an individual, we need to give it a name. Each ship instance has its own name. And then we can ask the ship to navigate, in other words, sail according to its current course and speed and so on. And then we can create as many instances as we like of the ship class. So here we'll create a second instance, and this will operate independently from the first one that we created. Each instance does its own thing according to its own internal settings and characteristics. So the second ship takes a completely different course. And we can create as many instances as we like. Let's create a third one just for demonstration purposes. And again, once again, it will operate completely independently of the other two and go off in a different direction, different speeds, whatever that might be. So we've begun to think about bits of terminology like class, object, and instance. And I don't expect you to have fully understood all the nuances of what those bits of terminology mean. But for now, it's enough to appreciate that class captures general characteristics of some type. And it's a little bit like a template or a blueprint. And then from that template or blueprint, we can create multiple individual instances that we call objects.